Hi everyone, I'm Rob King. Welcome to Homebrew number 50, and this one is going to be particularly special. For starters, it's a Punk IPA, one of my favourite drinks. But not only that, it was also my very first homebrew back in 2022. The recipe today is the exact recipe shared by Brewdog, so unlike that original kit, this one is going to contain all of the original ingredients and a shed load of hops. This one I am looking forward to tremendously. Now, a few facts about this recipe. First of all, it's a 75-minute boil. We are also in the fermentation going to follow the exact Brewdog specifications of dry hopping at 14 degrees centigrade. And then finally, the yeast in particular is a brand new activator yeast, and we'll get into that in a moment. Oh yes, let's check it all out. Now this is a very special episode, number 50, so we are going to take a few little new detours along the way, starting with the fact I am going to harvest the yeast from this recipe to use it in a future homebrew. I am also going to extend my fermentation chamber after a few disasters on that front, we'll get into that, and we are going to also use the ice spindle, which didn't go smoothly, but some lessons learned. So, having made more detours than a trip around the M25, we are also going to face into a few disasters, including a failed blow-off tube, running the mash out to higher temperature, and that aforementioned problems with fitting things into my fermentation chamber. Right, let's get going. Cheers. For equipment, we have the Digiboil and Digimash, of course, a recirculation pump, the chiller, including some tubing and gloves, the bucket blaster, which we use both for cleaning and for cooling, the fermenter, we need up to 15 litres for this particular recipe, a hop spider, the paddle, some Oxebar kegs which we're going to use for conditioning, a regulator with CO2, and of course the good old auto siphon. Also, we have a pH meter, a refractometer, a measuring cylinder and hydrometer, a thermometer, the blow-off tube, some bungs, a wine thief, clips for all of that tubing we mentioned earlier, a jeweler's scales and a normal kitchen scales. This recipe is going to include 23.3 litres of bottled water, a wide selection of hops which we'll come back to later, and for grains it is pale malt and caramel malt. We also have plenty of rice hulls to help with draining. For water chemistry, we have some Epsom salts, some chalk, some gypsum, and we may also use some lactic acid. We will also be adding some Fermentation nutrient into this recipe. Consumables then are sanitizer, some distilled water, we also have that powdered brewery wash for cleaning, we'll be using a Whirlfloc tablet for clarity, and of course some food grade grease. Not exactly typical items, but in this recipe we are going to use the Ferminator, which is a fermentation chamber. We're also going to test out the ice spindle for the first time. That was with some mixed results. We learned a few lessons, and finally we're also going to try and salvage some yeast, hence we've got some new kilner jars. Step number 1 though is to add that 23.3 litres of bottled water into the Digiboil. Now this is Ashbeck water, which I choose because of its low mineral content and also gives us a solid base to work out the water chemistry that we're going to need. We are setting the strike temperature to 69 degrees centigrade and turning the power up to full. Now this is connected to the Alexa plug so it can turn on automatically in the morning. The water chemistry is 1.4 grams of calcium chloride, 3.7 grams of Epsom salts, and 7.8 grams of gypsum. Finally, sanitize the fermenter, and it's time for bed. It's the following day. Alexa has turned on the water heater for us, so it's just time to add the water chemicals, giving it all a good mix to make sure it's all dissolved. We are ready to mash in, so it's time to bring down that temperature to 66 degrees and turn off the power. We are now running at 500 watts, starting with the Golden Promise and the caramel and giving it all a good mix. And we will add some rice hulls to aid with circulation, and once again make sure that's all well mixed in. We are going to mash at 66 degrees centigrade for 60 minutes. This is the Activator yeast, which has a little bag inside the pouch that you have to pop by giving it a good old smack. However, it did take a few tries to get this right. Once that inner bag has been popped though, it's time to homogenise and give it all a good mix up. 15 minutes into the mash and we are going to take a sample to test the pH. And of course, give it all a good mix while we're here. We first need to bring that sample down to room temperature before we can give it a test. The pH settled out at 5.38, that's perfectly in range and there's no need for a lactic acid addition. There are 6 hops in this recipe: Chinook, Artnum, Simcoe, Cascade, Nelson Sauvin and Amarillo. There are going to be 2 hop additions during the boil. Chinook and Artnum at 75 minutes and 30 minutes respectively. One absolutely mahoosive hop addition for the hop stand involving Artnum, Chinook, Simcoe and Nelson Sauvin. Hop stand hops ready. And an even more massive hop addition for the dry hopping, which I'm going to put to one side in readiness. That's Chinook, Artnum, Simcoe, Cascade, Nelson Sauvin and Amarillo. These are going back in the fridge because we don't need them till day 7. Mash is done. Mash out is 75 degrees. I also added full power for this step and hence overshot the 75 degrees target. Mix, mix, mix.
Lesson learned, overshot by miles. This should have been 75 degrees centigrade, and because I used full power, I think it was just too much. I should have left it on low power.
This is the pre-boil sample, which we will use to calculate the mash efficiency. Well, Brewfather will anyway. Mash out is done. It's time to get my muscles out. While the water is heating up for the boil, we can remove the grain basket and let it start to drain. We are setting the temperature for a boil and also powering up to full power, correctly this time. And of course helping the draining along by giving it all a good old mix. We are cooling the pre-boil sample down to room temperature before we take a reading. Now the reading has come in at 1.054, which is a little high. Our target was 1.044. Now this is the start of a few confusing readings. Pre-boil, the pH remains good, landing at 5.29. We are getting close to the boil, so it's time to take that grain basket away. Clearly we are coming to the boil, even though the temperature reading at the moment is 80 degrees centigrade. So I gave it a check with a manual thermometer and it's looking okay. No surprise there. Now the boil is 75 minutes. This is a long one. We will wait for the hot break, just seeing that foam removed before we start the additions and get the hop spider ready. Now that is pretty vigorous, so I am going to turn it down in just 1 second. These 75-minute additions are 4.3 grams of Chinook, which is giving us 9 IBUs, and 4 grams of Artnum, which is giving us 3 IBUs. Boil is good, we can bring that power down to 500 watts. You can see there the gentle rolling boil. We've made some adjustments to the boil off rates for this level of power. That's 25, 24, 23, that's about 20, dead on 22. So at the start of the boil we have 22 litres. At 30 minutes we are adding 15.6 grams of Chinook for 22 IBUs and 14 grams of Artemum for 6 IBUs. At 10 minutes we are adding 10 grams of Fermentation, a yeast nutrient. We are also adding a single whirlflock tablet to aid with clarity. Now on this occasion it really did not want to mix in and took a lot of effort to stop it all clumping together. We are also going to connect up the pump. This is going to allow us to circulate the wort, but it also sterilises the inside of the pump itself. And that horrible noise is what happens if you forget to open the valve to let the wort flow into the pump itself. With the circulation successfully working, I can also add the chiller. This also is to allow it to sterilise in the boiling wort. We are at the end of the 75-minute boil and we can turn off the power. At this point we run the chiller, but just very briefly so we can bring things down to 80 degrees centigrade, ready for the hop stand.
Hop stand is 80, so I'm going to drop this to 81 and then turn off the cooling.
The hop stand hops are 27.9 grams of Artemum, 21.6 grams of Chinook, 9 grams of Simcoe and 7.8 grams of Nelson Sauvin. Circulation will continue and the hop stand will run for 20 minutes at 80 degrees centigrade.
Post boil, 20 litres. 20-minute hop stand is up. We are going to get cooling going again.
Meanwhile, back in the garage, I'm just getting that cold water ready for my bucket blaster cooling method. Now the bucket blaster is actually a cleaning tool but can be repurposed to recycle cooling water. I'm just adding some salt and some ice to keep the water as low a temperature and as cold for as long as possible. We seem to have sprung a leak, but it just needed tightening up, I think. For the cooling step, I am switching from tap water to the bucket blaster cooling.
Connect here instead of the tap.
I purchased these clips last time. They're darned handy for keeping all of the tubing under control during this phase.
They're recycling water. Awesome.
And some extra ice packs to try and keep that temperature down. I'm taking out the hops and putting them into a jug. This can drain into the jug. The jug has also been sanitised, so I can add the wort back into the kettle.
This is now 23.6 degrees. I'm going to have to switch back for the last couple of degrees.
We are closing in on temperature, so we can take a gravity reading. The original gravity has come in at 1.052 versus a target of 1.054. Normally I would say this is pretty good, we're quite close, but I did mention they're a bit wonky considering the pre-boil gravity seemed higher. Back to the fermenter and the fermenter lid most importantly, I always do add some food grade grease to the lid given my previous experiences of having the lid stuck on the fermenter and unable to get in. We are down to temperature so the cooling can come out and we can start to prepare for the transfer. You can see here the whirlpool effect in action and we have a volume of 18.5 litres versus an expectation of just over 17. Impressive hops it is, yes. The yeast has been preparing and so it's time now to sanitise the packet so we're ready for pitching. And of course a good old shake to make sure it's all mixed and ready to go. And we are transferring the wort to the fermenter. Midway through we can pitch in the yeast too and help it all to mix in. Given that I'm never tidy when it comes to transfer, I'm also giving the fermenter a good old clean for all the wort that I spilt while transferring. As usual, nothing ever goes smoothly, and when putting my fermenter into the fermentation chamber, there was no room for an airlock, nor was there room for a blow-off tube either. Both my potential solutions were blown. This led to a bit of failed creativity to try and somehow squeeze in a blow-off tube. despite all of this effort, it actually didn't work. And I ran out of cling film while trying to do this. Of course I did. Locked up in the Ferminator, we are running this at 19 degrees centigrade. And yes, it's my favourite thing, it's time for cleaning. And we made a good old mess this time around. However, that powdered brewery wash is fantastic stuff. We just add it into the warm water and give it 30 minutes to soak. I told you that powdered brewery wash is fabulous. Easy peasy.
This doesn't seem to have worked, or something's gone wrong. However, it could be this. What do I do? No bubbles, so I think I might have a leak, but there does seem to be krausen forming.
This is my new ice spindle, which unfortunately arrived through the post just after brew day. However, I am going to introduce it now to try and compensate for the fact I've got no bubbles coming through the blow-off tube.
I'm not sure if this has been quite successful as I'd hoped. However, it smells amazing. We're going to take a look. That does look like it has fermented. Signs of krausen up the sides. I'm going to see what my new toy has to say about this whole situation. Hopefully it's going to tell me it's all wonderfully fermented. Right, everything's sanitised, my hands included. There it is. I can't help but tell you just how good this smells. Give it a blast of CO2. I've exposed it lots to air. I suppose we'll go with I don't need this anymore. It remains to be seen whether I get readings out here. We do seem to get some trouble here, that's promising.
I'm taking a sample to check on that gravity. The good news is the gravity is down to 1.014, so fermentation has certainly been successful.
The other thing to note here is bringing this temperature down slowly for dry hopping.
It's day 6 and it's time for dry hopping. Now I prepared the hops in advance and I'm also going to include these glass balls to help weigh down the hops in the hop bag. We're ready to go.
Temperature is down to 15 degrees centigrade. We'll reduce to 14 after the dry hops.
Adding the dry hops as quickly as we can to try and avoid that exposure to air.
Well, they have sunk well. My not working ice spindle.
Now let me explain myself on this point. I did actually configure it incorrectly, so I'll come back to explain all my stupid mistakes in a separate side video. We're going to drop that temperature down to 14 degrees centigrade for 7 days of dry hopping. We have arrived at day 13 and we are going to transfer into these 2 Oxebar kegs and carbonate. Before we begin, of course, it's time to clean and sanitize. The Ferminator has maintained a steady temperature of 14 degrees centigrade, and you can see there at the bottom the trub has dropped down nicely.
I did think my weights would hold the hops down a bit more than it did.
My extra long auto siphon at the ready. The biggest challenge is just not knocking everything over. That is an impressive layer of trub. We'll come back to that later. Getting everything ready for carbonation, I am fitting the 2 tapping heads, which contain duo-tight fittings. I'm also using the Kegland mini regulator and the SodaStream gas bottle for CO2. And of course, they don't fit in the Ferminator either. I should have guessed.
Here's the plan. So, gas in, bubble up through here, gets to here, and then I'm going to connect this. So the gas goes in here, and likewise bubbles up. Bubbling up, we have air in the top,
Get rid of that air. Right. I don't want to bubble air through this one, which is what's going to happen next. Now I attach this, and it should do exactly the same on number 2. Okay. Air at the top. Walk in. Right, now I've got to figure if I can just balance this in such a way as I can seal it up sufficiently. Well, a small tilt seems to do the trick. Ferminator probe. Temperature has gone up a bit, but we'll get the cooling going.
The final gravity remains steady at 1.014, giving us an ABV of 5%. It is time to recover that massive bag of hops, my incorrectly configured ice spindle, and of course give it all a good wash to recover the glass balls I used to weigh down the hops.
Step 1 for yeast washing. First we've got to get rid of the trub, which means giving this a good shake. Try and make sure we get as much of that as possible. I may add a little extra water because some of that's not coming off. Right, I'm going to cover this 30 minutes and then we're going to move 2 separate vessels.
We're going to transfer the washed yeast into kilner jars. To begin with then though, we need to sterilise them with boiling water. Now theoretically what we're looking for here is this to separate into 3 layers. There's some just wort at the top and the trub at the bottom, and then the yeast in suspension in the middle. Now we gave it plenty of time, but I just don't think there was any trub left at the bottom to really particularly remove. So we're just going to tip off that top layer of liquid and take the yeast into the kilner jars. We're now going to move these jars to the fridge where the colder temperature will allow the yeast to start to drop out to the bottom. 8 hours later and you can see that separation nice and clearly. The yeast is ready for us to reuse in an upcoming video. And time for some serious cleaning, thanks to the bucket blaster.
Okay, back from holidays. How's it all been getting on? Temperature stayed around 4 degrees. That looks about 18 psi, which is a bit high. This is down to about 8. It could go just a touch lower. So this is the nuke tap. I'm going to start it fairly restricted and then ease off if I need to. Now this is also the wrong way round, of course, so I need to get the liquid onto the yellow and the gas onto the red. Ah, the moment of truth.
We are day 23 and this is our first pour. It is just a little bit over carbonated, but I think we can adjust for that.
Oh, Roma though, ho ho ho.
I've brought the pressure down just a touch more and also just a little bit of restriction on the flow control, and we seem to be getting a reasonable pour out.
So a touch of an early taster. I'm back from holidays. I wanted just to see. Carbonation's a little bit high, but I'm able to adjust that down now. So it should settle, I hope, by the weekend. Lovely and cold, 4 degrees in the Ferminator. Lovely head, a little just off colour. The aroma is incredible, very hoppy. A lovely mix of different flavours. Oh, that smells absolutely wonderful. We're on target there. Also with taste, I have tried a couple of sips and we do seem to be pretty close. This is just a very, very drinkable IPA. Now, as far as clarity is concerned, it's a bit hazy, but I think we just need to give it a little bit more time. There is a touch of tartness on the aftertaste, but I do think that is just the conditioning, just letting the hops finish conditioning
There was a lot of hops in here, needs just a little bit more time. So we are looking promising.
After all those challenges with the Ferminator this time around, I decided to splash the cash and actually purchase the extension to the Ferminator, which is a brilliant addition. Also, instead of my towel, I've added a stainless steel tray to the bottom. Inside the cooler environment of the Ferminator, the pressure has increased again, so I'm just trying to bring it down a touch to get it down to 8 psi. The final step is to reattach the probe, which monitors the temperature.
The actual's reading 17, so it's heated up quite a lot, but hopefully this will cool quite quickly. Extended Ferminator. So we are a little early. This is just a test, but I couldn't resist. Carbonation looks good. We've got some nice bubbles coming up there at the bottom. It is a touch, on that fill, a little over-carbonated on the head, but I think we'll sort that out with the flow control. That's not too bad though, that pours pretty good. The problem we've got is just how cloudy it is. I was expecting it to get clearer than that. Head is nice and foamy, just a touch off-white in colour, but seems to be holding there quite nicely. Aroma, I can smell it while I'm talking, so the aroma is great. We get a full-on aroma. It's quite a dank, earthy aroma. Very nice indeed. I do like the aroma of a Punk IPA. Right, going in. Let's see how it tastes. Oh, that's nice. It is very clean, very crisp. I do like that taste. Carbonation is good, easy drinking, mouthfeel, perfect I think for a clone. I am enjoying this already. I know there's a lot of hops in here, but that doesn't come through. It really is a good balance with the malt. I'm going to try a bit more and we'll just give it another week and then come back and check on that clarity. Pressure was a bit low, but I have managed to pop it back up a little. Well, hello and welcome. Here I am. I've been relegated to the garage for the evaluation of the Punk IPA. And that's no bad thing because this is my second drink. So I've had a good chance to have a look at exactly how it's all turned out. I'll start with the colour. There is just a bit of a light medium haze in there. That is not particularly off target for the style, but certainly I was expecting it to be just a little clearer than it is. However, carbonation is absolutely wonderful. I don't know if you can see the bubbles there. I'll try and get a closer shot, but the carbonation is absolutely wonderful, absolutely delicious in the end result. It is probably off style for the clone of a Punk IPA. I don't recall Punk IPA being quite that carbonated. I don't have a problem with it, but in terms of making it on style, I'm just slightly off now, I think. Aroma though, now this is particularly special. I do love the very hoppy style of the Punk, and this absolutely tallies up pretty darn close. I am getting instantly quite a whiff of good quality hops, and I am loving it. Now, what I'm finding difficult though, given the shed load of different styles of hops and some hops I have never used before, I can't quite distinguish between them in terms of what I am detecting. I am loving what I'm detecting, but I can't quite distinguish. So yes, the next thing to try, of course, is a little sip. Now, immediately, the mouthfeel is wonderful. It's very light. Now we start to get that balance of flavours, and as I mentioned, there is a shed load of hops that go into this. This is very close to style for what we were looking for in a Punk IPA, which is a relief. I've got 16 litres to get through.
So yes, in wrap up, I think colour, carbonation, head, all very, very good. Aroma, absolutely off the scale, loving that. And finally the flavour. You have that lovely balance of hops and malt. This is not particularly a citrusy or hazy IPA. This is more of a classic, drinkable, quaffable, and absolutely delicious Punk IPA. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe. Good health, everybody. Cheers. Very good.
A quick check-in on the Homebrew Masterplan, and we have an ordinary bitter in conditioning. I'll be moving that into the fridge today, so should be able to taste that soon. We have 2 recipes that have already moved across into tasting. That's the Tepache fermented pineapple drink and the 1901 Iron Brew Turbo Cider, which has also had some problems. We'll have to tune in for more of those. Meanwhile, the Ice Spindle side project has spun up as a result of the challenges on the Punk IPA, and the Punk IPA video has finally completed and in your hands now. If you're looking for the next thing to watch, check out the Iron Brew Turbo Cider, the bad batch, all the challenges and problems of how not to brew a turbo cider, yet end up with a shockingly good end result. Go figure.